Hey, my name is Shane with Starters Woodworking, and in this video I'm going to show you how to build this crosscut sled for your table saw that has a bunch of extra fancy attachments. So let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so to start out here are some of the things that I will be using for this sled in this video, and as you can see, a lot of it's blue, which means it's from Rockler. And no, this video is not sponsored from Rockler, maybe one day. But it is actually sponsored by a gift card that I used to purchase these things. So thank you to whoever got me that gift card for sponsoring this video. Anyways, I'm starting out with a quarter sheet of Baltic birch sanded plywood, and I'm just cutting a foot off the one end. And this is because I really don't want this thing to be too huge, so I'm trimming it up just a little. Then I'm planing down this scrap piece of hardwood that I have. I honestly don't even know which type of wood it is, but these will act as my runners and will fit in my miter slot. So you can see me just running it through, testing it, and just keep running it until I get it to fit how I like it, just like that. Next, we're going to cut this guy down into our two little strips to sit in our miter slots. And you can see my makeshift push stick there. It's not the safest, but I didn't want to ruin any of my plastic push sticks, so I went with that little scrap piece. And you can see how it sits nice and flush with the top of the table. Now I'm dabbing just a couple dots of super glue onto these runners and then laying my plywood on top of it. And the reason this is awesome is because it saves me the hassle of trying to measure and get them perfectly. I know they will fit just right when I lay the piece of plywood on here like that. So we're going to push down and just put a little bit of pressure on the top of this piece of plywood just to allow that glue to set up for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll flip it over and come back and reinforce it with some mini screws. Now, it's important to countersink here so those screws don't interfere with your miter slots. So you want those screws to be sitting a little below the surface of your runners. And I'm using these little baby-sized screws. They're 3/8 of an inch, but they are perfect for this application since I didn't want to screw through the top. I've honestly never seen screws these small, so they were awesome. All right, time to install the T-tracks on top of the sled. And for this, I'm going to be using my table saw to cut some dados on the top piece of plywood. And since I don't have a dado stack, I'm doing this the old-fashioned way, which is just running a blades width, moving the fence over that same distance, and cutting it again until I get a perfectly tight fit. So the track sits just a little proud of the top of the piece of plywood, so I'm going to clean up the blade marks with the chisel, and I'm just going to let you enjoy this satisfying sound. Now, after listening to that sound, it actually sounds like a dog sniffing really fast. I thought that was kind of funny. Let me know if you guys heard the same thing. Anyways, we have a good fit, and now I'm going to be trimming 2.5 inches off of each T-track, and I will show you why I'm doing this in just a little bit. Alright, so when we fit these pieces back in, you can see at the top, it does not reach the whole way to the end. And the reason for this is, so once I attach the fence, I will be able to insert and remove the little hold down clamps if I need them or not. So this will definitely come in handy. Then we're going to come back again with our little baby 3/8 of an inch screw, and we're going to screw these pieces down. And I would normally use some quick drying epoxy or something like that, but I'm not going to on this build in case I want to reuse these T-tracks for anything in the future. Next, we can start preparing for the top and bottom fence. And for these, I'm just going to be using a piece of 2x4 that I had laying around. And this should honestly do the trick. I'm cutting off these corners here so I can make sure I will be able to get everything square once I'm finished. Then I'm just taking a light pass on each side to make sure, again, I can get that square edge. So my next step is going to be fitting this top rail on top of this fence here. And I can't just screw it down right to the top because as you can see, it has this little line going down the middle of it. So my plan here to try to avoid that is to cut a blaze width with my table saw right down the middle. And hopefully, if I have any luck, that'll allow this piece to slide right down and everything to fit flush. So let's go ahead and see what we can come up with. Alright, so it doesn't quite fit with just one blade path. So I'm going to move my fence over like the smallest amount possible, run it through the blade again, and come back and see if it'll fit this time. Well, I think we're closer. Yes, we are closer, but you can see this little chamfered edge here that just won't allow it to fit down in there. So this is a simple fix. I'm just taking my chisel and cutting away that edge there. And this doesn't have to be really pretty. Just make sure you get enough out to allow that chamfered edge to fit down in there, just like that. Then we're going to be upgrading from the baby 3/8 of an inch screw and using some actual larger screws. I think these were about maybe a little longer than an inch. And we're going to be attaching this. Next, we can finally attach both fences. And I'm going to be attaching the back fence first because this is not really as important to get square as you won't be using it as a reference. So I'm just going to throw some long decking screws in there, not really worrying too much if it's perfect or not until we get to the front fence. That's when we have to be a little more accurate and careful. For the square fence or the reference fence or the back fence or whatever you really want to call it, we're just going to be putting 2 screws in for now so we can check to make sure it's square before we finally put the rest of the screws in. Oh, and I actually forgot to mention that it's a good idea to chamfer this bottom part of the fence, and this allows the dust a place to sit and to not interfere with the squareness of the board you're working on. So I actually had to take this piece back off and do this real quick, then reattach it, which was no big deal. All right, now we're gonna cut this puppy up, and man, does this kind of feel wrong cutting through this thing that you just spent a couple hours on, but that is what you have to do. Then you want to see how lucky you got and see if your fence is square or not. And here I'm just using a test piece of wood just to get a rough estimate. But a better method is using the 5-cut method, which I will try my best to explain how it works. All right, so basically you want to get a square piece of wood or plywood or really whatever you want to use. Make a cut on your crosscut sled, turn it 90 degrees until you cut all 4 sides. Then on your 5th cut, you want to cut a longer scrap piece off so you can take a measurement on it. Then you want to take a caliper if you have one and measure the top and bottom thickness of that scrap piece you cut off. The general rule of thumb is if the top piece is thicker, you want to bump the left side of your sled up just a tad, and if the bottom side is thicker, then you want to bump the right side of your fence up just a tad. Alright, I hope that made a little bit of sense, and if it didn't, I know there's a bunch of videos that goes into that a little more in depth. But once you know your fence is square, you can go ahead and put all the screws in that you want. Alright, now we're going to make this bottom slippy and slidey with a fresh can of paste wax. Man, I love the way this stuff smells, I'm not going to lie. Anyways, we're just going to rub it down as much as we can, get some paste wax on there, and flip it over and let her slide. Now we're cooking. Alrighty, now that we are cooking, we are going to install the measuring tape and the stop block on this top part of T-track. Come on, Shane, don't mess up. Don't mess up. You only have one shot at this. Come on, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. Hey, look at that. That wasn't too bad. Anyways, we're going to try to line this thing up correctly, and for this I'm hooking the tape measure on the blade kerf path and measuring 4 inches to the kerf from the stop block. And you don't have to use 4, this is just the number I chose to go with. But then you want to take your sticky tape and line it up at 4 inches with that little red line on the marker. Then we can attach our little hold down clamps, and you can see how having that removability will really come in handy when I don't need to use them. I can easily slide them on and off as I need. But what we really need to do is see how accurate I really am and do a test cut. And you can see the stop block here really has no deflection, which is great because you don't want that messing up your measurements. Anyways, we're going to cut a scrap at 14 inches and bam, look at that. 14 right on the money. I couldn't be happier. So some people like to add a little block behind where the blade passes through just to protect their hands, but for the video's sake, I'm not going to do that. So anyways, look at that. That looks like a pretty nice crosscut sled if I've ever seen one. All right, so since I made this crosscut sled, I've used it a ton and it's come in handy a lot. I've already used it to cut some veneers on some end grain boards and some dados, and it just makes it so easy to get good, straight measurements and accurate cuts. So far, I'm definitely in love with it, and I'm definitely glad I made it. So I'm curious to know if you guys will make a sled like this, or if you already have one, or if this is too crazy for you and you're just going to make an easier one. Now I'm using it here to make some easy, repeatable cuts, and you can see how just easy and awesome it is to use. Alrighty, that is the end of the video today, and my question for you all is what type of table saw to use. I'm curious to see the different brands that you guys use, and let me know if you like it or you're looking for an upgrade soon. So start your comment with that and I will be sure to respond to those first. Anyways, have a nice day.